All those slide toppers have pros and cons. Just like anything else, they have a lot more pros than they do cons, especially when installed properly. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Nick. I'm an RV technician, and a lot of people know me as That RV Tech. And today we're going to be talking about installing a slide topper. I'm going to go over all the proper procedures, what you're going to need, as well as a few tips on things that I would personally do and things that I do a little bit differently as far as the installation goes. I like to get straight to the point because I know I can talk too much. So first things first, make sure that you measure properly for the slide toppers that you're going to order. Most manufacturers of slide toppers have a chart based off of your slide measurement. So you're going to measure from end to end of your slide, and then they will tell you the appropriate size slide topper that's going to go on there. So make sure you get the right size, and once you're ready, let's go. The very first thing you're going to do is on the slide room that you are putting the slide topper on, you're going to extend it about 8 inches. No more than 8 inches. It's about as far as you want to go. So you want to bring that out just a bit. And now that we've got the room out slightly, let's talk about how we get from here to a finished slide topper. Now before you start, this is pretty much everything you're going to need right here, with the exception of this. You can take that and get rid of it. It's not very helpful. But here's all the hardware you're going to get, and then all your brackets and rods and stuff like that. Now before you start, take your hardware and separate it. It makes it much easier than digging through a cup, and these two types of black screws are different and they serve a different purpose. This one here is fluted, which is for these brackets here, and this is for the actual rail. So you want to separate those so you don't accidentally use one of these in each other's place, because these ones need to be used for here, otherwise you won't be able to slide the bracket here on. So separate those first, get them organized, and you will thank yourself for that later. You're going to need a square bit, number 2. You're going to need an 1/8 inch hex bit. You're going to need a 5/16 and a 1/4 inch nut driver for this project. And that is everything you need. Everything you need comes with it, with the exception of butyl tape. You will need butyl tape. How much depends on how long your slide topper is and how many you're putting up, but you will need this for the project as well. That is how you're going to seal up the backs of all of these things that you're screwing to the coach to prevent leaks. So the first thing you will be installing is going to be this. This will be the first thing that you install on the side of the coach, and before you do that, you're going to need to use that butyl tape to seal it up, which is pretty simple. Just take yourself a piece just as long as the bracket here. Doesn't have to be exact. The stuff is stretchy, so you have some wiggle room with that. And because I don't have anything wide enough to cover this whole bracket, I'll be using 2 strips. So that stuff sticks down. If it's a really hot day, you're not going to have a whole lot of fun with this stuff. It's going to want to stick to your hands and whatnot. But you're going to get both of these brackets covered in butyl. All right, so now we're covered. Again, you don't want to skip this step. That is what's going to stop water from seeping through these screws or through the top here and into the holes that you're drilling into the coach. So this bracket has to go on a very particular way. As you can see, you have this little lip here sticking up. That side is going to face up. So make sure you get that correct as well. And then this is really simple. Some people like to go all the way up against the edge here where it stops. I actually like to come about 1/4 inch in and then set it there. This is one of the good things about butyl tape too, is because it's sticky, it will kind of let you set what you're putting on in place, and you can leave it there and not have to worry about trying to hold it up while you're screwing it in. And now we're going to use a drill. I do not recommend an impact for this entire project because you will likely just waller holes out, strip things out, and when it comes to putting these self-tappers right here in, they tend to break them using an impact. So try and use a drill if you have one. This is where your number 2 square bit, just like everything else in an RV, is going to come in, and you're going to screw this to the coach. Now I like the drill, again, because you won't waller the holes out, but you can still do that with a drill, so make sure you're not over tightening these. If you have a clutch on your drill, you can set that as well, but if you're good enough at doing it by feel. Now, like right there, I caught metal. These are self-tapping screws. If you get lucky enough, you'll catch some metal in here. Sometimes the whole top of this has metal behind the Phylon, and you'll grab into all of that, but not always. So that's the importance of not using an impact, so you're not wallering out the little bit of wood that you have to grab to. And that's that for that bracket. After that, you are going to have these brackets. Now you're going to have a high and a low setting. So you only have 2 rails here and you have 4 here. You set it to higher or lower. That's going to depend on how much space you have above the slide room. If you need to lower it so that you can obtain the correct pitch, you can do that. On this particular one, we are going to go on the lower setting. But as you can see, it won't slide on because I was too focused on recording and made the mistake I told you guys not to make. And I didn't use the proper screws because I was just talking away. So let me pull those screws out. Let's get the right screws in, and then we'll talk about getting that bracket on. All right, now that we're reattached with the proper screws in here, we're going to put this bracket on. Again, I'm going to the lower setting because I do have a gutter that sits right here just out of the frame, and it is going to stop me from getting the correct pitch. So I'm going to go to the lower setting. That's going to be determined by you and your particular setup, because you do want that rail up here high enough so that you have some downward pitch. But that's not always possible to get the rail as high as you want, so moving this down allows you to achieve the proper pitch. Now this is where the 1/8 inch hex bit is going to come in. You're going to use that, and then there are 4 set screws that come in the kit, these little black guys, and they have a little bit of red Loctite on them, and you're going to drive those in. Now if you're using an impact, 9 times out of 10 you're going to end up stripping these things, which is why I don't like using an impact on any part of a slide topper project. I actually don't use an impact a whole lot near RVs at all because it's not really necessary. Now this rail has a hole on one end. That hole is going to face the outside of the slide. So you're going to slide that in. Going to leave that alone for now, and we're going to go do the same thing to the other side of the slide room. All right, so we got this side up. Both sides are bracketed and ready to go. Now, this is a smaller slide room. I believe this is a 68 inch slide topper, so I'm going to be doing this one a little bit differently than I would do most of them. This is a little bit of a smaller slide room, so I'm going to show you my process for doing slides that are under 8 feet, which you can easily do with one person. Now, if you are doing a larger slide out, big kitchen slide out, living room slide out, you may want to have a second person as well as a second ladder so that you can have some help getting the slide topper up, getting it in the gutter rail, and getting it all mounted up without dropping it or ripping it. So the next step is going to involve mounting your rail to the coach. Now, again, with these smaller scale slides, my trick that I use to do by myself, I'm actually going to put this on the slide topper first and then bring the whole thing up here, and I'll show you that in a second. But on the longer ones, you'll usually want to mount this higher, or mount this on the coach, and then you're going to be using 2 people to slide the topper into the scudder rail. Now, one thing that you'll want to do to make it a little easier to slide the fabric into this is go over to the end of it and actually spread open the end of it so that it's got a little flute to it, and the gimp will slide right in there. Also, just like the brackets that you put on the coach, you're going to need to put butyl tape on the back of this rail. Don't peel it just yet until you're ready to stick it to the coach, because again, this stuff's sticky and it makes it kind of a pain to get it all lined up, but you will need to put butyl on the back of this as well. All right, so you can see here, I've got my rail attached to here. Again, it just slides in through the end, and it makes it a little easier if you actually open that up. Now, here's my trick on how I do these on my own, especially when they're close to the roof. I'll actually unroll it a little. I'll set my topper on the roof, just like that. And now I can easily mount this and not have to worry about trying to slide that thing in afterwards with two people. I do a lot of these on my own. So that makes it much easier if you have the ability to do so. Now the next thing is going to be your height. Again, how much pitch you have is important, so you need the height to be right. Now Solera recommends 3 to 6 inches. I found my magic number to be about 3.5, and I actually use a block of wood so that way I can make sure that I am exactly 3.5 up from the top of the seal on that room, and my measurement remains consistent throughout the entirety of the rail, because if it's crooked a little bit, you'll end up with wrinkles and a slide topper that doesn't look right when it's open or closed. So now we can remove the backing from the butyl tape. And this part can get a little tricky because, again, it's sticky. So the first thing is you want to center that rail as best as possible. You can do that by eye or by measurement and make sure that it is centered with the room. Next, we're going to take that block and carefully try and manipulate that into place. Once I get the middle stuck, I usually try and slide it left to right, and I will push the rail on. Again, this is where the butyl tape also helps you, because it makes it pretty easy to stick something to the side of the coach and make sure that it stays there while you're trying to screw it on. All right, so that's all stuck to it. And then you are going to drive all of your regular screws. These are the ones I pulled out that I used wrong in the beginning, and screw this to the coach. Using the same principle, make sure you don't over tighten, make sure you don't strip them, and make sure you don't waller those holes out. So I'll finish getting all these guys in. All right, so that slide topper is mounted. Now we just need to bring it up and over and get it onto the brackets here. Now again, with these smaller slide toppers, not that big of a deal. Get into the larger ones, I definitely recommend that you get some type of help. So the trick is, in this situation, doing it like this is you want to roll it back up as much as you can and still being able to attach it to the brackets. Now once you get it over, I'm holding it up with one arm. You'll slide that bar over there into the bracket. Now is where these Phillips screws are. Now you can use a PH3 Phillips bit, or you can use a square bit on these. And I usually opt for the square bit. I find I strip them a lot less. And you'll see the hole right there, and you're going to drive this into that hole. Now when you're doing this, make sure that you're still kind of trying to hold on to this. Remember, it's just floating in those bars, and if it comes disconnected from one, it will very likely come disconnected from the other, and your slide topper will fall down the side of your coach. Once you get one of them in, you're pretty much good. Again, don't over tighten, and just make sure it's nice and snug. All right, now same thing on this side. We're just gonna get that set screw in there. All right, so now we are attached, and we don't necessarily have to worry about it falling off too much anymore. So you can calm your nerves just a little bit at this point, especially on those bigger ones. On these smaller ones, it's not too much of a worry. You can at least catch these. Now we're just worried about centering the slide topper, making sure it's centered with the room. You can do that off-site or measurement, however you wish to do it. Usually off-site is not that difficult. Now that we're centered, we're going to lock the thing in place. And that is where these 5/16 self-tappers are going to take place, and they're going to go into the 2 pre-drilled holes on the rail here. So we're going to change out to our 5/16 nut driver and drive those in. Again, these are something that you don't want to over tighten. These are notorious for snapping. When they snap off in there, it's a huge pain. Now you've got to extract the rest of it and get a new one in there after drilling it out even larger. So again, back to using a drill driver and not an impact. All right, that side's set up. Let's get the other side. All right, so that side's fastened. We'll get our cover on here, which is a super simple step. Can be a pain sometimes. They don't seem to want to line up. Like right now. Oh, I really try and keep my channel PG-13, but there's times when I just want to invent new cuss words. Oh, what the Oh, there, crisis averted. Yeah, those can be a little bit of a pain to get on sometimes. It's nice because they cover the screws, but they're a real pain. All right, so we're bracketed up. The slide topper is technically mounted to the coach, ready to go, but not quite. There's the last few steps involving one, unlocking the springs and uncaging it, and securing the gimp screws so that the fabric doesn't slide around back and forth and become all uneven. And that's pretty simple. Let's get into it. So off on the side, on each side, you're going to see these pins. That is what's caging the springs because this is pre-wound. So the easiest way to do this is to take the tube, get a good grip on it, turn it inward towards the coach to get the tension off of this pin. As you can see, it's wiggling and like this, solid. So you're going to want to take it, pop it up, and it will pop out. Now, when you get the first side off, no big deal because the other side's still holding it on. Getting this side off, or the opposite side, is where you want to be a little more careful. So again, towards the coach, get the tension off of it, and pull that pin out. Now is when you want to use two hands and a lot of finesse to slowly get the pressure off of it. So now it's nice and tight. Now up here, you'll be putting a gimp screw. But what I like to do first is run the room out and then in, which I'll do real quick. I won't bore you guys with that content, just to make sure the fabric's all lined up nice and it's not crooked or anything like that, because you can tug it over in any which direction before you put that gimp screw in and lock the fabric in place. So here is where your 1/4 inch nut driver and these little black screws are going to come in. Now, I will tell you, this is probably the most frustrating part of the entire installation because a lot of times that gutter stops you from getting a nice vertical push on it so that the screw's not sliding around. It is a self-tapping screw, so it's going to go through the metal rail. You want to come about 6 inches in, and I'm going to tell you the trick before you drop that screw 25 times in a row into the grass. Try and push down on it and start real slow. Let it start digging its hole, and then you can speed up a little bit. Otherwise, what happens is you'll constantly slip off the rail because it's rounded and you're at a weird angle, and you will drop that screw 10 to 15 times at least, and it will drive you absolutely crazy, which is why I consider it one of the more frustrating parts of the slide topper. So you're going to do the same thing on the other side, and guess what? You have a slide topper installed. Now, if I were you, I'd run it in or out a few more times, make sure you don't have any hang-ups or anything like that. Again, don't skip the part about taking the pins out, because if you try and run it out before you take those pins out, you'll rip the gutter rail or these brackets clean off the slide room and cause all kinds of mayhem. So don't make that mistake. I've personally made that mistake. I've seen other technicians make that mistake. So I'm trying to warn you ahead of time not to do that. Learn from my mistakes. But that slide topper is essentially done. Now, there are a few things extra I personally would do. It's not in the instructions, it's not anywhere anybody else is going to tell you, but I'm going to cover them real quick. Now, we talked about the butyl tape that goes behind here, protecting it from water getting behind there and getting into the coach. I personally don't trust that enough, so a bead of sealant across the top of this gutter is definitely a good idea. If you're willing to take the time to do it, it should only take you a little bit. Again, that's not a step that's in the instructions, but something that I'm recommending you do. Same thing with the brackets down here. After those are installed, try and run a bead across the top of them, like down the sides of them. Anywhere you can protect water from coming in. Butyl tape does a fantastic job on your roof components. It's actually the primary seal, and Dicor is your secondary seal. The butyl tape does a really good job, but it doesn't hurt to be a little bit extra. I talk about being pro slide topper all the time, but slide toppers do come with their cons, and one of them is you're putting a bunch of new holes in the side of your coach where water can get in here. So you want to protect it as much as possible. Outside of that, they do a fantastic job of protecting the slide room, the roof, helping stop water from flowing into the coach, but they can, again, cause their own problems. So make sure, if you got the time and a tube of sealant, get a bead across the top of that gutter and the sides and tops of these brackets. You'll thank me later. One more thing that you'll want to look out for is if you have an awning that is sitting directly next to a slide or very close to a slide, or any situation where you're going to have something that may be obstructing the slide topper, you may want to actually size it down one more size, which isn't ideal because now the fabric isn't hanging over the edges of the slide room completely, but it's still covering the box of the room, just not the fascia. But you don't want it interacting or hitting that awning arm. I hope this helps you guys. I hope it saves you a little bit of money for those of you who have been considering slide toppers but maybe didn't want to pay the labor rates to do so. Hopefully this helps you do that. And of course, if you guys want to see more tips, tricks, and tours and RVs, make sure you press that subscribe button.